The Unmade Man, A Mother's Unbreakable Love. Chapter 1, The Shattered Dream. The hospital room, usually a sterile, impersonal space, glowed with a soft, late afternoon light that seemed almost divine. Elizabeth Mitchell, or Lizzie, as everyone called her, lay back against the pillows, her eyes fixed on the tiny bundle in the bassinet beside her bed. Noah, her son, he was perfect, she thought, stroking his miniature hand. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair, and a little button nose. David, her husband, stood beside her, his arm a warm weight around her shoulders. He looked a little overwhelmed, a little awestruck, but undeniably happy. "He's beautiful, Lizzie," David whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Our Noah." They had spent months planning, dreaming, decorating the nursery with tiny elephants and hot air balloons. Their life in Boston, in their cozy brownstone, felt complete. A successful career for David in finance, a burgeoning freelance writing career for Lizzie, and now a baby. The perfect American dream wrapped in a pastel blue blanket. But the dream had begun to fray at the edges even before they left the hospital. Noah was quiet, too quiet, the nurses murmured. His feeding was slow, his movements stiff. Lizzie, exhausted but vigilant, felt a cold knot of dread tighten in her stomach. David, usually so optimistic, grew increasingly quiet, his easy smile replaced by a worried frown. The pediatrician came in on the 3rd day, a kind-faced woman with tired eyes. She spoke softly, her words clinical yet devastating. "Elizabeth, David, we've done some preliminary tests. Noah is showing signs consistent with cerebral palsy. We need to do more, but the indicators are strong." Cerebral palsy. The words hung in the air like poison. Lizzie felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at David, expecting to see the same shock, the same disbelief. But what she saw instead was a flicker of something she couldn't quite name. Fear, certainly, but also resentment. Later that evening, after the doctor had left and a nurse had taken Noah for more tests, David stood by the window, his back to her. The city lights twinkled outside, oblivious to the seismic shift happening within their small room. "David?" Lizzie's voice was a raw whisper. "Did you hear her? Noah, our baby." He turned, and the expression on his face made her heart seize. It wasn't pity, not sympathy. It was anger, cold, hard anger. "I heard her, Elizabeth," he said, his voice flat, devoid of the warmth she'd loved for years. "Cerebral palsy. A child who will never run, never play sports, never be normal." He looked at her, his eyes blazing with a kind of desperate frustration. "I didn't sign up for this. I wasn't made for this." Lizzie stared, uncomprehending. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he bit out, "that this isn't the life I envisioned. Not the family. I can't do this, Lizzie. I can't." 3 days after Noah's birth, David walked out of that hospital room, out of her life and out of Noah's. He left behind a handwritten note on the bedside table. "I'm sorry, Lizzie. I can't. I'm not strong enough. David." The words blurred through her tears. The crisp white paper, the familiar handwriting, a testament to a love that had evaporated like morning mist. She clutched the note, the paper crumpling in her shaking hand, feeling a primal scream well up in her chest. Not for herself, not for her broken heart, but for her tiny, innocent son, abandoned before his life had truly begun. Chapter 2. The Weight of Solitude. The first few weeks at home were a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming despair. The silent nursery, once a symbol of hope, now mocked her with its untouched toys and empty crib. Noah was home, a fragile, beautiful presence, but David was not. His absence was a gaping wound, bleeding guilt and resentment into every corner of their once happy home. Lizzie struggled with everything, feeding Noah, changing him, trying to soothe his persistent cries. The physical demands were immense, but the emotional toll was crushing. Every time she looked at Noah, she saw David's fleeing back, heard his cruel words. "I wasn't made for this." Was she made for this? Was she strong enough? Doubt gnawed at her, a relentless parasite. Her parents lived across the country, supportive but distant. Her friends, unsure how to navigate the raw grief and anger radiating from her, offered hesitant help that often felt more like pity. She found herself shrinking, isolating, pulling away from the world. Her freelance writing, once a passion, now seemed an impossible luxury. There was no time, no energy, no words. One Tuesday morning, as she tried to coax Noah to feed, a gentle knock sounded at her door. Lizzie rarely answered it these days, her usual polite facade having crumbled. But the knocking persisted, soft and insistent. She opened it a crack, revealing the kind, lined face of Evelyn Howell, her elderly neighbor from 2 doors down. Evelyn, a widow who had lived in their brownstone for over 50 years, was known for her quiet strength and impeccable garden. "Elizabeth, dear," Evelyn said, her voice a warm balm, "I saw the hospital discharge flowers on your porch. Congratulations on the baby. May I come in?" Lizzie hesitated, feeling the mess of her hair, the stained t-shirt, the heavy fatigue in her bones. But Evelyn's eyes held no judgment, only warmth. She nodded, stepping back. Evelyn walked into the living room, her gaze sweeping over the unwashed dishes in the sink, the scattered baby blankets, the general disarray that marked Lizzie's surrender. She didn't comment. Instead, she simply sat on the edge of the sofa, her posture straight, her hands folded calmly in her lap. "He's beautiful," Evelyn said, looking at Noah, who was now stirring in Lizzie's arms. "What's his name?" "Noah," Lizzie replied. Lizzie whispered, her voice cracking. "Noah," Evelyn repeated, a soft smile playing on her lips. "A strong name, a name of new beginnings." And then, unexpectedly, Evelyn spoke of her own life. "My husband, George, was a difficult man, Elizabeth. Not like yours, perhaps, but with his own set of struggles. He left me, in a way, years ago, when he retreated into himself after his diagnosis. Sometimes, dear, the people we think we know best reveal themselves to be strangers when the true storms hit." Lizzie looked up, surprised. Evelyn had always seemed so serene, so settled. This quiet revelation was a lifeline in the churning waters of her own despair. "It's all right to be angry," Evelyn continued, her gaze steady. "And it's all right to feel lost. But you have a little one depending on you. And you, my dear, are stronger than you know." From that day on, Evelyn became a quiet, constant presence in Lizzie's life. She didn't pry about David, didn't offer empty platitudes. Instead, she brought homemade soup, folded laundry while Lizzie slept, and sometimes simply sat with Noah while Lizzie took a much-needed shower. She shared stories of her own life, tales of resilience and quiet endurance, never explicitly advising, but always providing a gentle example. Evelyn's most profound gift, however, was her perspective. "Look at him, Elizabeth," she'd say. watching Noah wiggle on his playmat. Look at his eyes. They're full of wonder. He doesn't know about his father. He only knows his mother's love. That's what truly matters. Slowly, painfully, Lizzie began to absorb Evelyn's lessons. She started small, forcing herself to take Noah for walks in the park, even if it meant facing curious stares. She found a support group for mothers of children with special needs. Tentatively at first, then with increasing gratitude, she met other women, their faces etched with similar fatigue, but also radiating an undeniable strength. They understood. They didn't offer pity. They offered solutions, shared resources, and most importantly, solidarity. Chapter 3. The First Steps. Noah's diagnosis was officially confirmed as spastic diplegia cerebral palsy, affecting primarily his legs. The doctors painted a challenging picture: intensive physical therapy, occupational therapy, possibly speech therapy, and a future filled with uncertainties. Lizzie listened, her mind racing, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information. But this time, fear didn't paralyze her. A fierce, protective instinct ignited within her. She was Noah's advocate, his protector, and she would fight for him. Her days became a whirlwind of appointments. Physical therapists, occupational therapists, neurologists, early intervention specialists. Lizzie learned about range of motion exercises, stretching, strengthening. She learned to identify the subtle signs of Noah's progress and to celebrate every tiny victory. One afternoon, during a physical therapy session, Noah, then nearly 2 years old, was placed on a mat, his small hands reaching for a brightly colored toy. His therapist, a cheerful woman named Sarah, gently guided his legs. "Come on, Noah," Sarah cooed. "Just a little push." Noah strained, his face red with effort. His little body trembled. Lizzie watched, her heart in her throat, silently willing him forward. And then he did it. He pushed himself up, shaky and unbalanced, onto his hands and knees. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. "He crawled," Lizzie cried, tears streaming down her face. "He really crawled." Sarah smiled, a genuine, joyful smile. "He's a fighter, Lizzie, just like his mom." Those words, "just like his mom," resonated deeply. Lizzie realized that somewhere along the way, amidst the tears and the exhaustion, she had found a strength she never knew she possessed. The anger at David had not vanished entirely, but it had receded, replaced by a fierce determination. She wasn't just surviving, she was doing. She was fighting for Noah, and in doing so, she was fighting for herself. She immersed herself in research. She devoured books on cerebral palsy, scoured medical journals, joined online forums. She learned about adaptive equipment, alternative therapies, educational approaches. She became a walking encyclopedia of CP knowledge, driven by an insatiable need to give Noah every possible advantage. Financially, things were tight. David had left her with their shared savings, but the medical bills were astronomical. Lizzie found a renewed purpose in her writing. She began pitching articles to parenting magazines, drawing on her own experiences. Her first published piece, "Finding Joy in the Uncharted Journey," was a raw, honest account of raising a child with special needs. It resonated with readers, and soon more assignments came. Her words, once stifled by grief, now flowed freely, a powerful outlet for her emotions and a means to provide for her son. They moved out of the brownstone. Boston, with its constant reminders of David and their former life, felt stifling. Evelyn, though sad to see them go, understood. "A new beginning, dear," she had said, hugging Lizzie tightly, "and you deserve it." They found a small, charming house in a quiet, tree-lined street in Concord, Massachusetts, a town steeped in history and surrounded by nature. It was smaller, but it felt like a fresh start. No ghosts of a broken marriage lingered here, only the promise of a future, uncertain but theirs to build. Chapter 4: The Silent Observer. Years passed. Noah grew, slow but steady, a testament to his own tenacity and Lizzie's relentless dedication. He learned to walk with the aid of crutches, his movements deliberate but independent. His smile, bright and infectious, lit up their small home. His mind was sharp, his curiosity boundless. He devoured books, fascinated by history and science, often asking questions that surprised Lizzie with their depth. Lizzie, now in her late 30s, had built a successful career as a freelance writer, specializing in human interest stories and articles on disability advocacy. Her articles, often poignant and insightful, had garnered a loyal readership. She was respected in her field, a far cry from the overwhelmed, tearful young mother who had once felt her world crumbling. She had dated a few times, tentative forays into a world she hadn't touched since David's departure, but none of them had understood the depth of her commitment to Noah, or the invisible scars David had left behind. She realized that she wasn't looking for a replacement, but for someone who could truly see and appreciate the life she had built, with all its complexities and joys. For now, Noah was her focus, her greatest love, her most profound accomplishment. One crisp autumn morning, a thick, cream-colored envelope arrived in the mail. It had no return address, just a neat, typed label. Inside, nestled among several sheets of thick paper, was a photograph. Lizzie's breath caught. It was David, older, his hair threaded with gray, his face etched with lines she didn't recognize. He was standing in front of a modest-looking office building, the name Phoenix Financial Solutions visible above the door. He looked tired. Not the vibrant, confident man she had married, but a shadow of him. Beneath the photo was a typed letter, unsigned, Elizabeth. I know you must be wondering why you're receiving this. I've watched you for years from a distance, seen the articles you've written, seen how you've built a life for yourself and Noah. I've seen him too, from afar, though I doubt he'd recognize me. I made a mistake, Elizabeth, a profound, unforgivable mistake. I chose weakness over love, fear over responsibility, and I've paid for it every day since. My life, it didn't turn out as I expected either. The success I chased, the freedom I thought I wanted, it was hollow, meaningless. I tried to build a new life, a new family, but it was built on sand. It crumbled. My second marriage ended years ago. I've been alone, truly alone, for a long time. I heard about a new experimental therapy for CP, a breakthrough in neural stimulation. It's being developed at Boston Children's Hospital. I've been researching it. It's expensive, incredibly so, but I wanted you to know about it. For Noah, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to have this information. Perhaps it could help him. A silent observer. Lizzie read the letter once, then a second time, her mind reeling. David. After all these years, watching them, the thought sent a shiver down her spine. The letter stirred a potent mix of emotions. Old hurt, lingering resentment, but also a flicker of something new. A strange, almost detached curiosity. He sounded broken. The man who had once declared he wasn't made for this now seemed unmade himself. The information about the experimental therapy, however, sparked immediate hope. She would investigate it, of course, for Noah, always for Noah. But the letter, It was a crack in the wall she had built around her heart, letting in echoes of a past she had painstakingly tried to bury. Chapter 5: Echoes of the Past. Lizzie immediately called Boston Children's Hospital. The experimental neural stimulation therapy was real, and it held incredible promise, but it was still in clinical trials and came with an astronomical price tag, not covered by insurance. The silent observer had been right. The letter continued to haunt her. Why now? Why send this information anonymously? Was it guilt? A desperate attempt at redemption? The idea of David watching them, a ghost in their periphery, was unsettling. She shared the letter with Evelyn, who now lived in a small cottage near Concord, a move prompted by her children who wanted her closer. Evelyn listened patiently, her wise eyes unreadable. "He's a desperate man, Elizabeth," Evelyn finally said. "Desperation can make people do strange things. Good things even. But his motives don't change his past actions." "But the therapy, Evelyn," Lizzie countered, her voice filled with a desperate hope. "It could change Noah's life. What if he sent it out of genuine care?" Evelyn smiled softly. "Perhaps, or perhaps, he simply found a way to ease his conscience without facing the consequences of his choices. Either way, the information is valuable. Focus on that." Lizzie dedicated herself to learning more about the therapy. It was cutting edge, involving precise electrical impulses to stimulate dormant neural pathways, potentially improving motor function in individuals with CP. The risks were present, but the potential rewards were immense. Noah, now a bright and engaging 12-year-old, was intrigued when Lizzie explained it to him. "It sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, Mom," he said, his eyes wide with wonder. "Will I be able to run?" Lizzie's heart ached. "We don't know, sweetheart, but we'll explore every possibility." Funding the therapy became her new obsession. She researched grants, applied for specialized loans, even considered setting up a crowdfunding campaign. Her writing gained a new urgency, focusing on stories of resilience and medical breakthroughs, subtly weaving in themes of hope and unexpected paths. One afternoon, while attending a conference on disability advocacy in Boston, Lizzie found herself with some free time. An inexplicable pull drew her towards the financial district, towards the address on David's anonymous photograph. It was foolish, she knew. What would she say? What did she even hope to find? But her feet carried her there anyway. The building was unassuming, a brick structure amidst taller, more modern skyscrapers. The sign for Phoenix Financial Solutions was discreet. She stood across the street, watching people enter and exit. Her heart hammered in her chest. Then she saw him. He walked out, alone, his shoulders slumped. He looked older, gaunt, his once sharp suits replaced by a rumpled blazer. He paused on the sidewalk, pulled out a cigarette, and lit it, his gaze vacant, lost in thought. He was a million miles away from the confident, ambitious young man who had once charmed her. He was not just tired, he was utterly defeated. Lizzie felt a strange mix of emotions. Not the searing anger she had once carried, but a melancholic pang. Pity, perhaps, for the hollow shell he had become. He looked like a man who had won the battle, but lost his soul. The unmade man. He didn't see her. He wouldn't have recognized her anyway after all these years. She was no longer the fragile, heartbroken girl he had abandoned. She was a woman forged in fire, strong and independent, her gaze steady, her purpose clear. She watched him for a few more minutes, then turned and walked away, a sense of quiet closure settling over her. The encounter had not brought resolution, but it had brought perspective. His misery was his own, a consequence of his choices. It no longer had the power to define her or Noah. A friendship blooms. Noah, despite his physical challenges, thrived academically and socially. He was intelligent, witty, and had a charm that drew people to him. He attended a public school in Concord that had an excellent special education program, and he was integrated into mainstream classes for subjects where he excelled. In his 8th grade history class, he befriended a girl named Olivia. Olivia was bright, empathetic, and possessed an innate understanding of Noah's struggles without pitying him. She saw past the crutches, past the slower movements, to the sharp mind and kind heart within. Their friendship blossomed over shared interests in historical fiction and a mutual disdain for math homework. Olivia would often wait for Noah after school, chatting animatedly as they navigated the busy hallways. She helped him carry his books, never making a fuss about it, treating it as simply what friends did. One afternoon, Olivia joined Noah and Lizzie for hot chocolate after a particularly challenging physical therapy session. Noah was tired, his muscles aching, but Olivia's presence lightened his mood. "So, Noah," Olivia said, stirring her hot chocolate, "my dad told me about this new coding club starting at the community center. It's for building video games. You're always so good at puzzles and logic. I thought you might like it." Noah's eyes lit up. "Video games? Like actually designing them?" "Yeah," Olivia grinned. "He said they teach you Python and everything. It sounds super cool." Lizzie watched them, a warmth spreading through her chest. Noah had always been fascinated by computers, spending hours online exploring coding tutorials. This was exactly what he needed: a passion, a creative outlet that wasn't limited by his physical abilities. He joined the club, and it was a revelation. Noah discovered a natural aptitude for coding, his logical mind excelling at the intricate problem-solving required. He spent hours immersed in lines of code, creating virtual worlds, designing characters, and programming complex narratives. His focus and dedication were remarkable. He found a sense of control and accomplishment in the digital realm that sometimes eluded him in the physical one. Lizzie witnessed his confidence soar. He wasn't just the kid with CP anymore. He was Noah, the budding game designer, the brilliant coder. His talents shone brightly, illuminating a path forward that Lizzie hadn't fully anticipated. It was another reminder that limitations, while real, did not define potential. The experimental therapy at Boston Children's Hospital remained on her mind. She continued her fundraising efforts, slowly accumulating the vast sum required. It was a long, arduous journey, but she held on to the hope it offered. One evening, Noah, beaming with pride, showed Lizzie a simple game he had designed. A pixelated adventure where a small, determined character navigated a labyrinth, overcoming obstacles. "This is amazing, Noah," Lizzie said, genuinely awestruck. "You made this? All by yourself?" With a little help from the instructor, he shrugged, though his smile betrayed his satisfaction. "And Olivia helped me brainstorm some of the level designs." It was a moment of profound realization for Lizzie. Noah was whole, capable, and thriving, regardless of the therapy. His life was rich, filled with friendship, intellectual pursuits, and blossoming passions. The therapy, while still important, no longer felt like the sole key to his happiness. It was a possibility, an enhancement, but not a prerequisite for his fulfillment. Chapter 7. The Unseen Connection. Noah was now in high school, a familiar presence in the school's computer lab, often surrounded by a cluster of admiring peers, eager to see his latest game concept. He had become something of a local legend, a testament to what focus and determination could achieve. His crutches were still a part of him, but they seemed less significant, almost an afterthought compared to the vibrant energy that radiated from him. Lizzie, nearing her 50th birthday, continued her writing, her work now focusing on stories of unconventional success and the power of human connection. She occasionally wrote about her journey with Noah, always careful to protect his privacy while sharing the universal themes of love and resilience. Her articles had gained national recognition, leading to speaking engagements and a small but steady income that allowed them a comfortable life. The fund for Noah's therapy had grown significantly, thanks to her relentless efforts and a few anonymous large donations that Lizzie suspected might have come from the silent observer. She still received an occasional, untraceable envelope containing newspaper clippings about new medical advancements or a brief, typed note wishing them well. The anonymity remained, a peculiar, lingering connection to a past she had mostly put behind her. One particularly rainy Saturday, Lizzie and Noah were at the local library, Noah absorbed in a book on artificial intelligence, Lizzie researching for her next article. As she scanned the shelves in the biography section, a familiar face caught her eye. An older man, hunched over a laptop at a table, his gray hair thinning, his shoulders narrow. It was David. Her breath hitched. She hadn't seen him since that fleeting glimpse on the Boston sidewalk years ago. He looked even older, more drawn, his face marked by an undeniable sadness. He wore simple, almost threadbare clothes. The once sharp edges of his ambition seemed to have eroded, leaving behind a profound weariness. Noah, engrossed in his book, didn't notice. Lizzie hesitated, her mind racing. What should she do? Acknowledge him? Walk away? The old wounds, though scarred over, still throbbed with a phantom ache. She watched him, unseen. He closed his laptop, sighed heavily, and ran a hand through his sparse hair. He looked utterly alone. As he slowly gathered his things, an old, faded photograph slipped from his wallet and fluttered to the floor. Lizzie's eyes widened. It was a picture of her, young and smiling, on their wedding day, and beside her, a tiny swaddled baby, Noah, in the hospital, just days old. The very picture David had refused to look at after his diagnosis. He picked it up, his gaze lingering on the image, a wave of raw emotion, so potent it seemed to ripple across the quiet library, washed over his face. Regret. Profound, aching regret. He traced the tiny face of the baby with a trembling finger, then quickly tucked the photo back into his wallet as if it burned him. He stood up, his movements stiff, and walked towards the exit. Just as he passed her aisle, he paused, his eyes sweeping over the book she was holding. For a split second, their gazes met. His eyes, once so full of life and ambition, were now clouded with a deep, almost haunted sadness. Recognition flickered, a jolt of surprise, then something else. Shame. Profound and immediate. He flinched, as if struck, and quickly averted his gaze, hurrying out of the library without another word. Lizzie stood frozen, the book forgotten in her hand. The encounter was brief, silent, yet it spoke volumes. The silent observer was not just a sender of anonymous letters. He was a man living with the heavy burden of his past. a past he could not escape, a son he had abandoned but never truly forgotten. The anger, the resentment she had carried for so long, finally, completely evaporated. It was replaced by a quiet sorrow for the wasted years, for the man he had become, for the family he had chosen to lose. She realized, with a clarity that stung, that David's suffering was far greater than any pain he had inflicted on her. He had lost Noah's childhood, Noah's laughter, Noah's unconditional love. And that, she understood, was a far greater tragedy than anything she had endured. Chapter 8. The Gift of Forgiveness. The experimental therapy at Boston Children's Hospital finally became a viable option for Noah. The funds were secured, thanks in large part to the continued anonymous donations that Lizzie now knew were likely from David. It was a curious form of penance, a silent acknowledgement of his absence. The therapy was intensive, requiring Noah to spend weeks at the hospital for various procedures and follow-up rehabilitation. Lizzie stayed by his side, a constant, unwavering presence. She watched as Noah, brave and determined, underwent the rigorous treatments. There were moments of pain, moments of frustration, but Noah faced them with an incredible spirit. During one of Noah's recovery periods, a nurse approached Lizzie. "Miss Mitchell," she said softly, "there's a gentleman who comes here often, asking about Noah. He never gives his name, just asks how he's doing. He seems very concerned." Lizzie knew immediately who it was. David, still watching, still lingering in the shadows. One afternoon, as Noah rested, Lizzie decided to confront the ghost. She walked to the waiting area, a place she knew David frequented, and there he was, sitting alone, staring blankly at a television screen. She walked up to him. "David." He looked up, startled. His eyes, though still filled with sadness, held a raw vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "Lizzie," he whispered, his voice hoarse. He looked down at his hands, unable to meet her gaze. I just wanted to know if he was okay." "He's okay," Lizzie said, her voice calm, devoid of the anger she once thought she'd feel. "He's amazing, actually. He's a brilliant coder, a wonderful friend, and the most resilient person I know." David slowly looked up, his eyes welling with tears. "I know," he said, his voice barely audible. I've been watching his progress online, your articles. He's incredible. And you, Lizzie, you raised him, all by yourself." A long silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words, with years of pain and regret. "Why?" Lizzie finally asked, her voice soft. "Why did you leave, David? Why now, after all these years?" He swallowed hard, his gaze fixed on some distant point. "Fear," he confessed, the word a bitter taste in his mouth. "Pure, unadulterated fear. I was so young, so ambitious. I had this perfect vision of my life, my family. And when the doctor said cerebral palsy, that vision shattered. I couldn't see past it. I thought I wasn't capable of handling it. I was a coward, Lizzie. A complete and utter coward." He paused, then continued, his voice heavy with remorse. "And the anonymity. I was too ashamed to face you, to face what I had done. Sending money, information. It was the only way I could contribute, could feel like I wasn't a complete waste. It was never about seeking forgiveness. I just wanted to help, in my own inadequate way." Lizzie listened, her heart aching for the lost years, for the man who had been so broken by his own fear. She saw not the cruel husband who had abandoned her, but a man consumed by regret, a man who had suffered his own kind of loss, perhaps even deeper than hers, because it was a loss of his own making. "Noah doesn't know you," she said, her voice gentle. "He knows his mother. He knows Evelyn, who has been like a grandmother to him. He knows his friends. He knows the people who stayed." David nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I know, and I deserve that. I deserve to be a stranger to him." Lizzie looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw not a villain, but a flawed, deeply regretful human being. The anger had long since dissipated. What remained was a profound sense of understanding, and perhaps a quiet, almost melancholic form of forgiveness. Not for him, not for his benefit, but for her own peace. "I forgave you a long time ago, David," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Not for your sake, but for mine, and for Noah's. Because carrying that anger, it only hurt us." He looked up, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and disbelief. "You? You forgave me?" "Yes," she affirmed. "It took time, a lot of time. But I realized that your choices were about you, not about Noah or me, and I couldn't let them define our lives." He bowed his head, sobbing quietly. "Thank you, Lizzie, thank you." She didn't offer comfort, didn't touch him. The chasm between them was too wide for physical closeness. But the words, the quiet acknowledgement, were a bridge not for reunion, but for release. Chapter 9. The New Definition of Love. Noah's therapy yielded remarkable results. While it didn't completely cure his cerebral palsy, that was never the expectation, it significantly improved his motor control, balance, and gait. He was able to walk with less reliance on his crutches, often using only one or even walking short distances unassisted. The improvements were subtle but life-altering, opening up new possibilities. He began attending college. Pursuing a degree in computer science, his passion for game design unwavering. He even started a small independent game development studio with Olivia, who was studying graphic design. Their first game, a poignant narrative adventure focusing on themes of resilience and overcoming adversity, garnered critical acclaim and a small but dedicated following. Noah channeled his own experiences into his creations, imbuing them with depth and authenticity. Lizzie watched him, her heart overflowing with pride. He was everything she had ever hoped for and more. He was happy, fulfilled, and loved. He was a testament to the power of a mother's unwavering love and the indomitable human spirit. Her life, too, had settled into a profound peace. She continued to write, her articles now infused with a deeper wisdom, a quieter strength. She occasionally heard snippets about David. He had left Boston, moved to a smaller town, living a solitary life. She felt no malice, only a lingering sense of melancholy for the path he had chosen. One warm summer evening, Lizzie sat on her porch in Concord, the scent of honeysuckle heavy in the air. Noah was out with Olivia, probably brainstorming new game ideas. The house was quiet, but it was a comfortable, peaceful quiet, not the echoing emptiness of years past. Evelyn, now frail but still sharp-witted, joined her, sipping iced tea. "He's grown into such a fine young man, Elizabeth," Evelyn murmured, watching the fireflies flicker in the twilight. "He has," Lizzie agreed, a soft smile on her face. "He really has. And you," Evelyn said, turning to her, her eyes warm. "You've grown too, into the woman you were always meant to be." Lizzie considered this. The young, naive woman who had married David, brimming with conventional dreams, felt like a distant memory. The woman she was now was scarred, yes, but also immensely strong, fiercely independent. and profoundly content. She had learned the true meaning of love, not the romantic ideal David had chased, but the unconditional, sacrificial, enduring love she had given to Noah. She had learned to love herself too, to forgive herself for the anger she had carried, for the moments of despair, to acknowledge her own strength, her own resilience. She realized that David's departure, though agonizing at the time, had been a catalyst. It had forced her to dig deep, to find reserves of power she never knew existed. It had unmade him, but it had made her. The missing piece David had ripped from her life had been replaced by something far more substantial, a profound connection with her son, a deep well of self-respect, and a quiet understanding of life's true priorities. She had built a world for Noah, not just a house, but a sanctuary of love, acceptance, and opportunity. Noah came home later, his face flushed with excitement. "Mom, we just had the best idea for our new game. It's going to be about a character who has to learn to see the world differently, to find strength in unexpected places." Lizzie listened, her heart swelling. He was talking about his own journey, about their journey. She looked at her son, his eyes bright with passion, his spirit unbroken. She thought of David, lost in his self-imposed solitude. She thought of the perfect life she had once envisioned, and how different and infinitely richer the reality had become. The love she felt for Noah was a blazing star, steady and constant. It was a love that had grown through every challenge, every cure, every triumph. It was the kind of love that transformed, that healed, that made everything worthwhile. And she knew with absolute certainty that she was truly, completely home. Her life was not a shattered dream, but a beautifully, imperfectly, powerfully rebuilt reality. And she was more than content. She was truly, deeply happy. Chapter 10. The Unspoken Legacy. Years turned into decades. Noah completed college, his game development studio flourishing. His games, renowned for their emotional depth and innovative gameplay, often explored themes of empathy, resilience, and navigating a world that wasn't always designed for everyone. He became a quiet advocate, using his platform to promote inclusivity and understanding, always with a gentle touch. Lizzie, now a celebrated author, her books topping bestseller lists, continued to write stories that touched hearts and minds. She sometimes revisited her early days with Noah, not with bitterness, but with a profound sense of gratitude for the journey. Her words became a source of comfort and inspiration for countless readers, particularly women navigating their own challenges. Evelyn, her beloved mentor, passed away peacefully in her sleep, leaving behind a legacy of quiet strength and unwavering kindness that continued to inspire Lizzie. The lessons Evelyn had imparted about resilience, about finding joy in the small things, about the profound power of self-love, were woven into the fabric of Lizzie's being. Noah eventually met and fell in love with a brilliant software engineer named Maya. Their wedding was a joyous, intimate affair in their backyard, filled with laughter and heartfelt vows. Watching Noah standing tall and confident beside his bride, Lizzie felt a wave of overwhelming emotion. He was living a full, beautiful life, a life that had once been deemed not normal by a fearful young man. David, he remained a distant, silent presence. Lizzie would occasionally see mentions of him in old financial news articles, a failed business venture, a quiet retirement. She learned that he had never remarried, never had other children. His life, by all accounts, remained as solitary as it had appeared that day in the library. The anonymous donations for Noah's therapy had ceased years ago, a silent acknowledgement, perhaps, that Noah was finally truly independent. Lizzie never sought him out again, and he never approached her. The unspoken understanding between them, forged in regret and a quiet, almost spiritual act of forgiveness, was enough. He had found his own way to bear the weight of his past, and she, hers. One crisp autumn afternoon, many years after Noah's wedding, Lizzie sat in her study, a ray of golden sunlight illuminating her desk. She was rereading one of her first articles, finding joy in the uncharted journey, the one she had written in the early days of her struggle. The words felt raw, vulnerable, yet undeniably true. She thought of the young woman she had been, shattered and adrift. She thought of the fear, the anger, the loneliness. And then she looked out her window, at the vibrant autumn leaves, at the quiet street where she had built her life, where Noah had grown into the remarkable man he was. Her life had taken an unexpected turn, a path she never would have chosen. It was not the perfect, idyllic dream she had once envisioned. It was something far richer, far more meaningful. It was a life built on resilience, on unwavering love, on the profound strength of a mother's heart. She had learned to love, truly love, in a way she never would have if David had stayed. She had learned that love wasn't about perfection or convenience or the absence of hardship. It was about presence, about commitment, about seeing past challenges to the unique beauty within. It was about showing up every single day, even when it was impossibly hard, and in loving Noah so fiercely, so unconditionally, she had finally learned to love herself, to embrace her strength, to accept her vulnerabilities, to forgive her past self for the grief she had endured. She was whole, complete, and profoundly grateful for the journey, for every step, every stumble, every triumph. The story of the unmade man was a footnote in her life, a painful chapter that had ultimately led to her own making. Her legacy wasn't just in her writing. It was in Noah, in the love they shared, in the lives they had touched. It was a legacy of an unbreakable love, the true tale of resilience, whispered on the wind, etched in the hearts of those who knew their story. And it was, finally, the story of profound peace.